In this video, I will be reading a powerful and inspiring monologue from Ayn Rand's classic novel, The Fountainhead. This is a book that has a really special place in my heart, and this speech that I am going to read to you is one of the reasons why. Roark, the protagonist of the novel, is often seen as the embodiment of the ideal man. He is really independent, self-sufficient and uncompromising in his integrity. In this speech, Roark defends his beliefs and celebrates the creative spirit. If you want to read the book afterwards because you're inspired by what I'm going to read to you, you can do it because I have removed any spoilers from this speech. So, let's begin. Thousands of years ago, the first man discovered how to make fire. He was probably burned at the stake he had taught his brothers to light. He was considered an evildoer who had dealt with a demon mankind dreaded. But thereafter, men had fire to keep them warm, cook their food, and light their caves. He had left them a gift they had not conceived, and he had lifted darkness of the earth. Centuries later, the first man invented the wheel. He was probably torn on the rack he had taught his brothers to build. He was considered a transgressor who had ventured into forbidden territory. But thereafter, men could travel past any horizon. He had left them a gift they have not conceived, and he had opened the roads of the world. That man, the unsubmissive and first, stands in the opening chapter of every legend mankind has recorded about its beginning. Adam was condemned to suffer because he had eaten the fruit of the tree of knowledge. Whatever the legend, somewhere in the shadow of its memory, mankind knew that its glory began with one, and that one paid for his courage. Throughout the century, there were men who took first steps down new roads, armed with nothing but their own vision. Their goals differed, but they all had this in common, that the step was first. The road new, the vision unborrowed, and the response they received, hatred. The great creators, the tinkerers, the artists, the scientists, the inventors stood alone against the men of their time. Every great new thought was opposed. Every great new invention was denounced. The first motor was considered foolish. The airplane was considered impossible. The power loom was considered vicious. Anesthesia was considered sinful. But the men of unborrowed vision went ahead. They fought, they suffered, and they paid. But they won. No creator was prompted by desire to serve his brother, for his brothers rejected the gift he offered, and that gift destroyed the slothful routine of their lives. His truth was his only motive, his own truth and his work to achieve it in his own way. A symphony, a book, an engine, a philosophy, an airplane, or a building. This was his goal and his life. His vision, his strength and his courage came from his own spirit. A man's spirit, however, is his self, that entity which is his consciousness. To think, to feel, to judge, to act are the functions of the ego. The creators were not selfless. It is the whole secret of their power, that it was self-sufficient, self-motivated, self-generated. A first cause, a font of energy, a life force, a prime mover. The creator served nothing and no one. He lived for himself. And only by living for himself was he able to achieve the things which are the glory of mankind. Such is the nature of achievement. Man cannot survive except throughout his mind. He comes on earth unarmed. His brain is his only weapon. Animals obtain food by force. Man has no claws, no fangs, no horns, no great strength of muscle. He must plant his food or hunt it. To plant, he needs a process of thought. To hunt, he needs weapons, and to make weapons, a process of thought. From the simplest necessity to the highest religious abstraction, from the wheel to the skyscraper, everything we are and everything we have comes from a single attribute of man, the function of his reasoning mind. But the mind is an attribute of the individual. There is no such thing as a collective brain. There is no such thing as a collective thought. An agreement reached by a group of men is only compromise or an average drawn by many individual thoughts. It is a secondary consequence. The primary act, the process of reason, must be performed by each man alone. We can divide meal among many men. We cannot digest it in a collective stomach. No man can use his lung to breathe for another man. No man can use his brain to think for another. All the functions of the body and the spirit are private. They cannot be shared or transferred. We inherit the products of the thoughts of other men. We inherit the wheel. We inherit the cart. The cart becomes an automobile. The automobile becomes an airplane. But all through the process, what we receive from others is only the end product of their thinking. The moving force is the creative faculty which takes this product as material, uses it and originates the next step. This creative faculty cannot be given, received, shared or borrowed. It belongs to single individual man. That which it creates is the property of the creator. Men learn from one another, but all learning is only the exchange of material. No man can give another the capacity to think. Yet that capacity is our only means of survival. Nothing is given to man on earth. Everything he needs has to be produced. And here man faces his basic alternative. He can survive in only one of two ways: by the independent work of his own mind, or as a parasite fed by the minds of others. The creator originates. The parasite borrows. The creator faces nature alone. The parasite faces nature through an intermediary. The creator's concern is the conquest of nature. The parasite's concern is the conquest of man. The creator lives for his work. He needs no other man. His primary goal is within himself. The parasite lives second-hand. He needs others. Others become his prime motive. The basic need of the creator is independence. The reasoning mind cannot work under any form of compulsion. It cannot be curbed, sacrificed, or subordinated to any consideration whatsoever. It demands total independence in function and in motive. To a creator, all relations with men are secondary. The basic need of the second-hander is to secure his ties with men in order to be fed. He places relations first. He declares that men exist in order to serve others. He preaches altruism. Altruism is the doctrine which demands that men live for others and place others above self. No man can live for another. He cannot share his spirit as he cannot share his body. But the second-hander has used altruism as a weapon of exploitation and reversed the base of mankind's moral principles. Men have been taught dependence as a virtue. The man who attempts to live for others is a dependent. He is a parasite in motive and makes parasites of those he serves. The relationship produces nothing but mutual corruption. It is impossible in concept. The nearest approach to it in reality, the man who lives to serve others, is the slave. If physical slavery is repulsive, how much more repulsive is the concept of servility of the spirit? The conquered slave has a vestige of honor. He has the merit of having resisted and of considering his condition evil. But the man who enslaves himself voluntarily in the name of love is the basest of creatures. He degrades the dignity of man and he degrades the conception of love. But this is the essence of altruism. Men have been taught that the highest virtue is not to achieve, but to give. Yet, one cannot give that which has not been created. Creation comes before distribution, or there will be nothing to distribute. The need of the Creator comes before any beneficiary. Yet we are taught to admire the second-hander who dispenses gifts he has not produced above the man who made the gifts possible. We praise an act of charity. We shrug at an act of achievement. Men have been taught that their first concern is to relieve the suffering of others. But suffering is a disease. Should one come upon it, one tries to give relief and assistance. To make that the highest test of a virtue is to make suffering the most important part of life. Then man must wish to see others suffer in order that he may be virtuous. Such is the nature of altruism. The Creator is not concerned with disease, but with life. Yet, the work of the creators has eliminated one form of disease after another in man's body and spirit, and brought more relief from suffering than any altruism could ever conceive. Men have been taught that it is a virtue to agree with others, but the Creator is the man who disagrees. Men have been taught that it is a virtue to swim with the current, but the Creator is the man who goes against the current. Men have been taught that it is a virtue to stand together, but the Creator is the man who stands alone. Men have been taught that the ego is the synonym of evil and selfishness is the ideal of virtue. But the Creator is the egotist in the absolute sense, and the selfless man is the one who does not think, feel, judge, or act. These are the functions of the self. Here, the basic reversal is the most deadly. The issue has been perverted and man has been left no alternative and no freedom. As pose of good and evil, he was offered two conceptions, egotism and altruism. Egotism was held to mean the sacrifice of others to self, and altruism, the sacrifice of self to others. This tied man irrevocably to other men and left him nothing but a choice of pain, his own pain for the sake of others, or pain inflicted upon others for the sake of the self. When it was added that man must find joy in self-immolation, the trap was closed. Man was forced to accept masochism as his ideal, under the threat that sadism was his only alternative. This was the greatest fraud ever perpetrated on mankind. This was the device by which dependence and suffering were perpetrated as fundamentals of life. The choice is not self-sacrifice or domination. The choice is independence or dependence, the code of the Creator or the code of the second-hander. This is the basic issue. It rests upon the alternative of life or death. The code of the Creator is built on the needs of the reasoning mind which allows man to survive. The code of the second-hander is built on the needs of a mind incapable of survival. All that which proceeds from man's independent ego is good. All that which proceeds from man's dependence upon man is evil. The egotist in the absolute sense is not the man who sacrifices others. He is the man who stands above the need of using others in any manner. He does not function through them. He is not concerned with them in any primary matter. Not in his aim, not in his motive, not in his thinking or his desires, not in the source of his energy. He does not exist for any other man, and he asks no other man to exist for him. This is the only form of brotherhood and mutual respect possible between men. Degrees of ability vary, but the basic principles remain the same. The degree of a man's independence, initiative, and personal love for his work determines his talent as a worker and his worth as a man. Independence is the only gauge of human virtue and value. What a man is and makes of himself, not what he has or hasn't done for others. There is no substitute for personal dignity. There is no standard of personal dignity except independence. In all proper relationships, there is no sacrifice of anyone to anyone. An architect needs clients, but he does not subordinate his work to their wishes. They need him, but they do not order a house just to give him a commission. Men exchange their work by free mutual consent to mutual advantage when their personal interests agree and they both desire the exchange. If they do not desire it, they are not forced to deal with each other. They seek further. This is the only possible form of relationship between equals. Anything else is a relation of slave to master or victim to executioner. No work is done collectively by a major decision. Every creative job is achieved under the guidance of a single thought. An architect requires a great man to erect his building, but he does not ask them to vote on his design. They work together by free agreement, and each is free in his proper function. An architect uses steel, glass, and concrete produced by others, but the materials remain just so much steel, glass, and concrete until he touches them. What he does with them is his individual product and his individual property. This is the only pattern for proper cooperation among men. The first right on earth is the right of the ego. Man's first duty is to himself. His moral law is never to place his prime goal within the persons of others. His moral obligation is to do what he wishes, provided his wish does not depend primarily upon other men. This includes the whole sphere of his creative faculty, his thinking, and his work. But it does not include the sphere of the gangster, the altruist, and the dictator. A man thinks and works alone. A man cannot rob, exploit, or rule alone. Robbery, exploitation, and ruling presupposes victims. They imply dependence. They are the province of the second-hander. Rulers of men are not egotists. They create nothing. They exist entirely through the persons of others. Their goal is in their subjects and in the activity of enslaving. They are as dependent as the beggar, the social worker, and the bandit. The form of dependence does not matter. But men were taught to regard second-handers, tyrants, emperors, dictators as exponents of egotism. By this fraud, they were made to destroy the ego, themselves, and others. The purpose of the fraud was to destroy creators, or to harness them, which is a synonym. From the beginning of history, the two antagonists stood face to face. the creator and the second-hander. When the first creator invented the wheel, the first second-hander responded. He invented altruism. The creator denied, opposed, persecuted, exploited, went on, moved forward and carried all humanity along on his energy. The second-hander contributed nothing to the process except the impediments. The contest has another name: the individual against the collective. The common good of a collective, a race, a class, a state, was the claim and justification of every tyranny ever established over men. Every major horror of history was committed in the name of an altruistic motive. Has any act of selfishness ever equaled the carnage perpetrated by disciples of altruism? Does the fault lie in man's hypocrisy or in the nature of the principle? The most dreadful butchers were the most sincere. They believed in the perfect society reached through the guillotine and the firing squad. Nobody questioned their right to murder, since they were murdering for an altruistic purpose. It was accepted that men must be sacrificed for other men. Actors change, but the course of the tragedy remains the same. A humanitarian who starts with declarations of love for mankind and ends with a sea of blood. It goes on and will go on so long as men believe that an action is good if it is unselfish. That permits the altruism to act and forces his victims to bear it. The leaders of collectivist movement ask nothing for themselves, but observe the results. The only good which men can do to one another and the only statement of their proper relationship is hands off. It is an ancient conflict. Men have come close to the truth, but it was destroyed each time and one civilization fell after another. Civilization is the progress towards a society of privacy. The savage's whole existence is public, ruled by the laws of his tribe. Civilization is the process of setting men free from men. Now, in our age of collectivism, the rule of the second-hander and the second-rater, the ancient monster has broken loose and is running amok. It has brought men to a level of intellectual indecency never equal on earth. It has reached a scale of horror without precedent. It has poisoned every mind. I am an architect. I know what is to come by the principle on which it is built. We are approaching a world in which I cannot permit myself to live. I came here to say that I do not recognize anyone's right to 1 minute of my life, nor to any part of my energy, nor to any achievement of mine. No matter who makes the claim, how large their number or how great their need. I wish to come here and say that I am a man who does not exist for others. It has to be said, the world is perished from an orgy of self-sacrificing. I wish to come here and say that integrity of a man's creative work is of greater importance than any charitable endeavor. Those of you who do not understand this are the men who are destroying the world. I wished to come here and to state my terms. I do not care to exist on any others. And so, this is the inspiring speech of Howard Roark. If you've liked it, read the book.